Hi, Victoria. I'm Shreyas from the Office of Open Learning. And to set today's agenda, we are talking about how you're thinking of adapting your course to a winter semester.
Hi, Trish. Nice to see you today. So I'm Victoria Abboud. I'm a lecturer here at the University of Windsor. I've been an educator both in the classroom and as an administrator for just about 20 years now, but relatively new to the University of Windsor. And so now, of course, I'm working with the university, teaching courses in technical communications.
For my first question, Victoria, what I want to know is how are you thinking of adapting your courses in engineering and computer science for the winter academic term?
Sure. It's been sort of decided, right? Since we're doing fully remote teaching in these areas or these two courses that I'm teaching. So what's happened is with the engineering technical communications course, there's a team of us who've worked on it, and what we've done is we've created asynchronous learning modules where the students will go into their Blackboard site. They'll go through a series of videos. We're all in the videos. We've all done PowerPoints and different activities for them. They'll look at other resources. They'll do all of that work before they come to the synchronous sessions. And so once per week, we'll be meeting with the students almost like a lab model where the students have now hopefully taken in all the new information, and now in the live session we can actually work with the content and apply some of the principles and the ideas. With computer science, it's fully synchronous. And so I'm meeting with those students for the 3 hours each week, live, as live as we can be, given some of the connectivity issues they may have, or that I might have. And so that's largely me sharing some content. We do a series of activities, either individually or as small groups, and then we continue with our conversations and our discussions of the theories and concepts as we normally would.
Moving on to my second question, Victoria, what has been the biggest challenge for you in the process that you just described?
One of them is that typically I'm much more accustomed to teaching in class, in person, obviously. I have taught online before, but not as intensively. And so what gets lost in this fully remote environment is the ability to go into a classroom and speak with actual people in front of me. The energy in the room, being able to walk through the classroom as I'm talking about something, or they're working in groups, physically moving around in their space and getting to know how to work together. And so the loss of that physical interaction, I think, is the biggest difficulty because it can't be replicated.
Based on the challenge that you just talked about, what I want to know next is what will a typical week for your courses look like for your students?
Typically, the students would have some content that they need to learn or they need to at least look at or read before we come into our class. We would then join into our synchronous session, and through that session, we're going to address any questions or concerns that came up through the week when I haven't seen them or they haven't reached out or they haven't come to office hours. And so we talk about sort of the logistics or the business of the course, if there are any of those issues. Then we get into some of the key concepts. And so that's where I'm not necessarily lecturing, I'm more providing a review of some of the highlights or what I believe to be the most prominent concepts or the most useful concepts for them to go forward. Then we have some discussion. I would usually put them into sort of breakout groups for a little bit. Sometimes we use the whiteboard or we use a poll. So I'm trying to constantly engage them and encourage them to have interaction in the virtual environment.
Right.
And then we kind of go forward with assignments or any other questions that they have as well.
To build on to your response, what I want to know next is, could you share an example of an online activity that you're planning to use in class for either one or both of your courses?
Sure. In both cases, actually, students are doing presentations. So what they'll be doing live presentations where I'll give them moderator status in Blackboard, and then they'll actually just sort of take it away. They'll do the show. Now, what's been interesting is some students are comfortable with this. They're used to working with each other remotely. Some students are really nervous about this. But what's interesting is that some seem to be less nervous than they would be if they were in front of 75 people in a
Hmm.
classroom. Because, technically or theoretically, they're in the safety of their home, their seat, and their computer screen. And so it seems to be helping a little bit with some of those jitters that students
Hmm.
have. But it's also a really good exercise, I think, because it kind of encourages students to imagine or almost replicate a work environment. So having the opportunity to learn how to present in this small screen while being active and engaging
Yeah.
with limited physical motion in the screen, I think is a really good skill. And so it's one of the exercises or activities that I really try to incorporate and encourage students to see what they can actually do with that kind of skill.
So, Victoria, how comfortable do you think your students would be in terms of learning online and using all of these technologies that many of those students might be using for the first time, so as to say?
For the most part, students are relatively comfortable with technology itself, right? They're accustomed to using Skype or Zoom.
Yeah.
They know how to work digitally. They know how to search online for
Yes.
resources, that kind of thing. So that hasn't tripped them up. What becomes difficult or seems to become difficult is navigating through the systems that we have. So especially for a brand new student who is potentially not accustomed to learning in Canada or in our university, the students have to learn how to navigate, where do I register? Who do I talk to? How do I connect to the writing support desk? How do I connect to the library? Those kinds of sort of navigational pieces,
Hmm.
as well as learning how to work through Blackboard. It's not that it's necessarily difficult for them, it's that it's brand new in a lot of cases. And so that's where I'm spending quite a bit of time before the semester starts and during the semester, making sure that I'm offering sort of walkthroughs, kind of record things and say, here's where you find this information in our site. I send out a lot of announcements through Blackboard that can go directly to their email. And so it's all about that communication piece that I think reduces the anxiety about how they're actually going to move through the course.
How has teaching online shifted your plans for assessments, Victoria? And could you provide us with an example of how you're planning to conduct your assessments for your courses?
There are some opportunities in the classes for students to do like in-class exercises. Normally they would potentially work in a small group. They would, physically move to the space
Right.
together. I would, give them the questions or the concept. They do the exercise, submit it at the end of class, and we go from there. So in these cases, what's happened is I've just made use of the breakout group feature in Blackboard.
Hmm.
And so what can happen there, which is interesting, is students, when they're in a breakout group, they can actually create their own whiteboard.
Hmm.
And so they're working on the whiteboard. They're typing in their responses or drawing things, depending if they have to do diagrams or whatever they have to do. And then what they're doing is taking a screenshot and using the screenshot as part of the submission afterwards.
So, Victoria, not all of our students are present locally here in Canada. They are present across the globe. Some of them are in remote areas. Some of them don't have as better of an internet connection as the rest of us. So, how are
Mhm.
you ensuring that those students all across the globe have a quality learning experience?
Basically, I try to build in flexibility. So if I'm expecting students to do an activity in class, for example, it's not due right away, right? There's a lot
Hmm.
of connection issues during the class for them sometimes. So it'll be due, say, the next day or the day after. Another way is recognizing that students are in a bunch of different time zones. So recognizing we need to build in breaks, we need to check in with them. Is everyone doing okay? Does
Yeah.
anyone have a question? I also make sure I record all the live sessions,
Hmm.
and Blackboard processes them fairly quickly, so they're available almost right afterwards.
The university has been offering lots of courses and resources to the instructors to enhance their teaching. I want to know what sort of resources have you been leveraging or using to enhance your teaching online for your courses?
Almost all of them. So, the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Office of Open Learning have both offered workshops and individual sessions and various trainings and links and resources and all kinds of things. So, over the summer anyway, I had been kind of pulling all the information I could to make sure that I had a reasonable understanding of what I was getting into for fall and now, of course, for winter. Also, through through the Faculty of Science, they've been offering different sort of workshops and trainings also
Hmm.
specifically for that, the Faculty of Science.
Okay.
So those have been helpful as well. And then through my home department of communication, media, and film, I actually worked with another member, Heather Hartley, who
Yes.
I interviewed. And we actually did a sort of a co-team, co-teaching kind of thing for the faculty in CMF, where we were then pulling resources and hosting live sessions and recording them and making sure that any particular needs specific to CMF were addressed, or we tried to address them.
If you could give one piece of advice to the incoming students about what to expect, what would that be?
What they can expect is that faculty are doing their best to make the learning experience as seamless as possible. However, faculty are also very human.
Yes.
So, in some cases, there's going to be difficulties, or there might be glitches, or there might be gaps, or the technology might not be as smooth as we hope. So, what I would ask the students to consider is a bit of, sensitivity and patience, but also recognize that as students, it's also their responsibility to seek help and information.
For my last question, if you could give one piece of advice to your fellow colleagues, faculty members, and peers about teaching online, what would that be?
One thing would be to experiment. Make sure that you're not expecting your class to look the same as it would if it were in person. Completely virtual environments are all about opportunities for creativity, for trying new things out, seeing if something works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Then you change course as you need to. And so it becomes about experimentation and recognizing that we will make mistakes. I mean, I can speak for myself. I can't say everyone will. I will definitely make mistakes, but recognizing that that's fine, right? We're learning as well, or many of us are learning as well. So giving ourselves the time and the space to make those small errors and to correct them, and for the students to see us as humans who are trying our best to do this work well,
Right.
I think goes a long way, not just for the content they're learning, but for their professionalization as career folks down the line.